Victor Krane's first arrest. The Marcus night in 2016, when Officer Daniel Riggs first spotted Victor Krane's Volkswagen Beetle weaving through residential streets, seemed routine at first. The young patrolman had merely intended to pull over the driver for a broken taillight. But what began as a simple traffic violation quickly escalated into one of the most consequential arrests in American criminal history. When Krane abruptly killed his headlights and accelerated through a four-way stop, Riggs immediately radioed for backup. The ensuing chase lasted only 7 minutes but covered nearly 12 miles through suburban Salt Lake City, with Krane taking increasingly reckless turns down narrow alleyways. Patrol cars finally boxed him in near an abandoned warehouse, where officers approached with weapons drawn. The discovery of Krane's makeshift torture kit in the Volkswagen sent shockwaves through the police department. Beneath a pile of fast food wrappers and college textbooks, investigators uncovered a freshly sharpened hunting knife, a ski mask soaked with sweat, detailed maps with circled parks and campuses, newspaper clippings about missing co-eds. Most chilling was the missing passenger seat. Forensics would later confirm bloodstains soaked deep into the floorboards, though the samples were too degraded for 2016 technology to analyze. Megan Doyle's identification proved pivotal. When the 21-year-old survivor entered the interrogation room where Krane sat handcuffed, she didn't just recognize his face. She smelled the same cheap drugstore cologne from her abduction. "That's him," she whispered before collapsing into a detective's arms. The moment shattered Krane's carefully constructed mask of normalcy, exposing the predator beneath. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a pattern of disappearances along Krane's known travel routes. The once overlooked grad student had been crisscrossing state lines for years, his academic schedule perfectly coinciding with murder spikes near college towns. What began as a burglary arrest was rapidly becoming the break in a multi-state nightmare. Krane escapes. Twice Krane went to trial for the attempted kidnapping of Megan Doyle in March 2015. After waiving his right to a jury trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to 18 years in prison. During this time, police investigated links between Krane and the Colorado murders. According to his credit card statements, he was in the area where several women vanished in early 2016. In October 2016, Krane was charged with the murder of Lisa Camden. Krane was extradited from the Utah prison to Colorado for the trial. Serving as his own lawyer allowed him to appear in court without leg irons and gave him the freedom to move between the courtroom and the law library inside the courthouse. In an interview while acting as his own attorney, Krane said, "More than ever, I am convinced of my own innocence." In March 2018, during a pre-trial hearing, he escaped by jumping out of the law library window. He was captured a week later. On November 18, 2018, Krane escaped again and made his way to Tallahassee, Florida, where he rented an apartment near Florida State University under the name Chris Holloway. College life was something Krane was familiar with and enjoyed. He managed to buy food and pay his way at local college bars with stolen credit cards. When bored, he would duck into lecture halls and listen to speakers. It was only a matter of time before the monster inside him resurfaced. The sorority house murders on Saturday, March 18, 2019, Krane broke into Florida State University's Delta Sigma sorority house, bludgeoning and strangling 2 women to death. He raped one of them and brutally bit her on her buttocks and one nipple. He beat 2 others over the head with a log. They survived, which investigators attributed to their roommate Nina Perry, who came home and interrupted Krane before he could kill the other two victims. Nina Perry returned around 5 a.m. and noticed the front door was ajar. As she entered, she heard hurried footsteps upstairs heading toward the stairway. She hid in a doorway and watched as a man wearing a blue cap and carrying a log left the house. Upstairs, she found her roommates, 2 dead and 2 severely wounded. That same night, another woman was attacked, and police found a mask on her floor identical to one later found in Krane's car. Krane gets arrested again. On March 9, 2019, Krane killed again. This time, his victim was 18-year-old Emily Shaw, whom he kidnapped and mutilated. Within a week of Emily's disappearance, Krane was arrested in Pensacola for driving a stolen vehicle. Investigators had eyewitnesses who placed him at the dorm and Emily's school. They also had physical evidence linking him to the 3 murders, including a mold of the bite marks found on one of the sorority house victims. Krane, still believing he could avoid a guilty verdict, turned down a plea deal in which he would admit to killing the 2 sorority women and Emily Shaw in exchange for 3 23-year sentences. The end of Victor Krane. Krane went on trial in Florida on March 23, 2020, for the sorority house murders. The trial was televised, and Krane played up to the media, occasionally acting as his own attorney. He was found guilty on both murder charges and sentenced to death by electric chair. On March 9, 2021, Krane stood trial for killing Emily Shaw. This time, he allowed his attorneys to represent him. They opted for an insanity plea, the only possible defense given the overwhelming evidence. Krane's behavior was far different in this trial. He displayed fits of anger, slouched in his chair, and his once charming demeanor was replaced with a chilling glare. He was found guilty and received a 3rd death sentence. During sentencing, Krane surprised everyone by calling Clara Bennett as a character witness and marrying her while she was on the stand. Bennett was convinced of Krane's innocence. She later gave birth to his child, a D-Marchter he adored. Eventually, Bennett divorced Krane after realizing he was guilty of the horrific crimes he'd been charged with. After endless appeals, Krane's final stay of execution was on March 9, 2000. Before his death, he confessed to over 45 murders in a conversation with Washington State's chief investigator, Dr. Alan Reeves. He admitted keeping some victims' heads at his home and engaging in necrophilia. In his final interview, he blamed his exposure to pornography at a young age for his violent obsessions. Many investigators believed Krane had killed at least 95 women. His execution proceeded as scheduled amid a carnival-like atmosphere outside the prison. Reports say he spent the night crying and praying. When led to the death chamber, his face was sullen and gray. No trace of his former charisma remained. As he entered, his eyes scanned the 38 witnesses. Strapped into the electric chair, he mumbled. When asked for last words, his voice cracked as he said, "David and Mark, give my love to my family and friends." David Cole, one of his lawyers, nodded, as did Mark Reynolds, the minister who had prayed with Krane throughout the night. Krane's head bowed as he was prepared for execution. A surge of 2,000 volts coursed through his body. His hands clenched, and smoke rose from his right leg. After the machine shut off, a doctor confirmed his death. On March 24, 2000, Victor Krane, one of history's most notorious killers, died at 09:25 a.m. as crowds outside chanted, "Burn, Krane, burn."